Welcome back. It is budget day in Saskatchewan, and there is a lot to unpack. For some context, I'm joined now by Jason Childs, an economist at the University of Regina, and Jim Farney, the Regina head of the Johnson-Choyama School of Public Policy. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Jim,
thank you.
Wondering what stood out off the top. Are there any clear winners in this budget?
I don't think there's any big single winner. I mean, this is, if you think of the economic times we've just come through, a remarkably get back to the steady state path budget. Kind of thinking of it politically, though, I think the government's pulled off a really interesting trick in that they're a conservative government. They've got some populist leanings, and we've all seen how that's been kind of changing lately. But they've managed to put together a budget and a long-term plan. It says Saskatchewan's open to export our resources globally, and it's working really well this year. And we're open to international immigration, and it's solving some key policy problems for us, and we're committed to it. I think that is, you don't see that in the line by line of the budget, but that's a really big kind of strategic picture thing that they've won on this year.
Jason, let's look at resource revenue, specifically potash and oil. The budget's forecasting oil at about $75 a barrel, for example. We saw Alberta forecast at $70. What is the risk reward here?
Right. So the risk is that we miss, but right now it's all upside risk. So we're looking at oil prices right today. We're around $110 a barrel. So where there's money we're not putting in the budget that we're leaving potentially on the table and could be spent later or arrive and used to pay down debt. So that's the upside risk. Potash is there's a little less wiggle room there compared to the current prices, but we'll see how that goes. So we've got money that might come in that we haven't allocated to anything, and that's the risk on that side. The downside risk, I don't really see prices being much below the forecast in the coming year.
Obviously, we'll still have
PST is being added to things like concert tickets, sporting events, gym memberships. In a time when people are already paying more for everything, Jim, won't this feel like piling on?
Well, I think people are going to notice it. And, if you go back kind of 6 or 7 years when they added PST to used cars, there was quite a bit of outcry. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business was criticizing the government this afternoon for the planned increase to small business taxes as well. So there are tax increases. They are being criticized for them. But politically, it's I think, kind of safe ground. They're going to annoy some folks, but the people who are annoyed by tax increases are unlikely to vote NDP. That's, I don't think, a really credible switch. So. And they're relatively minor, right? We're going to know some people will grumble about them, but it's not some sort of massive new tax that we're about to see.
Jason, there is some more spending in terms of education and social services, but not a lot in terms of actual increases. Where does this leave those struggling to make ends meet?
Right. There's not a lot of help at that end of the spectrum, and there's not a lot of new money in the budget. So inflation is going to erode the real dollars that we're seeing spent here. So we're seeing actually in some of these items, we're seeing a decline in the real dollars available. So education's in that ballpark. And that's going to create probably some labor strife as people and workers start to ask for wage increases that keep up with inflation, but it's not in the budget. That's going to be a problem for the next little while.
The province has noted it wants to take over the federal carbon tax and that a report on its plan of action won't happen until fall of this year. Jim, what's the strategy here after many years of carbon tax?
I mean, and some pretty significant court cases. So they are going to have to come up with a plan that meets the federal requirements, that the federal government will say, yes, this is functionally the same as what you're already doing. To be honest, I'm not clear how much room they'll have to do something really different. I mean, folks have talked about a New Brunswick-style plan where you pay the tax and then it's immediately rebated, and the feds have said no, we won't let you go there. So I don't know how much difference they'll get it, but it will be, it'll be branded as a Saskatchewan plan. There may be some different carve-outs for agriculture, perhaps, but I don't think we're going to see anything fundamentally different from the federal requirements.
That said, Jason, what are the financial implications for all of us as taxpayers?
Well, right now, each household in Saskatchewan's contributing about $750 a year in carbon tax, and that's going to rise on April 1st, and with the carbon tax and clean fuel standard. And we're getting through tax returns a lot of that back. It's variable by where you live and how much you earn, of course. So what the dollars and cents are going to be if we move to a Saskatchewan plan depends on how they go about making it revenue neutral, or if they make it revenue neutral at all. So if one of the options put on the table might happen to be, as BC did when they introduced it before the federal standard, was a reduction in income tax rates to be made up by carbon tax revenue, you're going to see that play out through the system a little differently. And that's not going to do very much for people who aren't paying income tax or living on social assistance. It could go into hospital care or other things as well. So we'll have to wait and see what the plan actually looks like and who's going to be the recipient of the funds.
Jim, I'm curious where this all leaves the Saskatchewan NDP. We have this budget combined with the federal NDP deal with the Liberals at a time when the NDP in Saskatchewan are trying to find a new leader. How do they gain traction?
I think they're in a hard place. So just think about the provincial scene. They had two big lines of criticism of the budget. One was the affordability piece, which is a real concern, but it's a live one and it's important right now, but it's a really slippery political issue to figure out who owns, right? Because you've got Pierre Poilievre, for example, federally trying to say, I own that issue with a different set of solutions.
Sometimes it's a little messy. I think everyone who sits on this floor will
understand. So the other side is the kind of more conventional stuff that Jason was talking about, that spending on programs doesn't keep up with need. And, the social service increase of $30 a month is a great example. I think they'll land punches on that, but they have been for 15 years now and not gaining ground. Add in the federal kind of close to a coalition agreement, and yeah, it's not a good place for them to be in terms of growth.
Jason, the finance minister says she is sticking to a plan to return to balance by 2026-27. Based on what you saw this last fiscal year and then looking at this budget, is it doable?
Absolutely, it's doable. It's in the numbers. I mean, we could be back to balance if oil prices stay where they are or very close there too. For example, last year we would have seen a balanced budget if agriculture spending hadn't spiked due to the drought. So we're within striking distance of a balanced budget here. The revenue is there, and the spending hasn't gotten away from that revenue. We'll see what surprises this year brings, because it's been an eventful last couple of years.
Before I let you both go, I'm curious, what's one thing you'll both be watching, I know you'll be watching, as politicians debate this budget? Jim, we'll start with you.
I'm really curious to see how the NDP melds kind of a coherent position. I mean, they've got some stuff in play. There is the leadership contest that they're already kind of working through. There's always grounds to criticize a government. I'm just wondering how they kind of position themselves against this particular budget.
And Jason, what about you?
I'll be watching the labor relations to see, how they come about dealing with the wage demands that I'm expecting most unions to make. We're looking at 5-6% inflation. There's going to be wage acts in that ballpark, and where's that money going to come from? Are we going to see major labor disputes?
Well, thank you both so much for your time and expertise tonight. Jim Farney, the Regina head of the Johnson Shoyama School of Public Policy, and Jason Childs, an economist and professor at the University of Regina.